Welcome to the show. I'm Cathy Mohlahlana. A pleasure to be back in your company this morning. Please excuse me if my voice is a little bit shaky or my nose is still sounding a bit blocked. Yeah, I've been battling a cold. This is what happens when you've got little young ones. Every time they sneeze, every time they cough, you can't help but also catch a sneeze. And so it's the benefits, I guess, of being a mom to toddlers. But here's a look at what you can expect coming up on the show. The first hour will start off with the open line, as we always do. Plenty for us to talk about. I wonder how you're feeling about the work being done by the IEC for the country to venture into the possibility of e-voting. It's something that I'm looking at with keen interest. This conference over the next couple of days in Cape Town, and some of the insights, best practice knowledge that will be shared from other parts of the world, particularly those countries that took on the project and started with electronic voting and then ended up dropping it. So what were some of the challenges that they have faced? Of course, there are a handful of countries that are still able to run electronic voting quite successfully so. And it seems to be something that is really inevitable, right? That we will ultimately move into it. Think about the children who are being born today. Do you think those kids are going to be standing in a queue to vote? I don't think so. Not when their whole lives revolve and are going to be run by technology. But how do we manage some of these transitions that we need to be looking at as a society? So that's absolutely one that I think we need to be engaging quite keenly because, it does affect how the future of elections will look like in this country. Yeah, interesting reports coming out of the weekend, in particular the interview done by the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana with the Sunday Times, where it seems that by and large, as South Africans, we should anticipate a VAT increase on Wednesday when the budget is expected to be tabled. The work of the Treasury now, of course, will be to ensure that there is lobbying so that as many parties are able to support that budget come Wednesday. But of course, we know that the issue of VAT was what also led to not only opposition parties, but even members of the ANC standing up to say that they will not pass a budget that has such high, proposals around VAT. Now, the different iterations that we understand are being looked at now is perhaps marginal increases over a number of years. So think about it, maybe increasing VAT by 0.5% each year for the next couple of years. So ultimately, you'll probably still get to that 2%, but it just won't happen at once. What struck me, though, that the minister said in this interview with the Sunday Times is that there wouldn't be the need for a VAT increase if government was to cancel the social relief of distress grant. You remember that grant implemented under COVID-19, 370 Rand now, and government has continued that SRD grant. There's no question about the impact that it has had on the lives of the South Africans that receive it. There's also, of course, the question of a need that too many South Africans who need to access that grant are unable to because of the stringent criteria. But the minister is saying if he didn't have to find money for that grant, there wouldn't be a need for VAT. And I just wonder if we're actually having broad enough conversations as a country around how we respond to the question of social security and the kind of support that we offer South Africans who are in need of social security and social assistance. And these are the difficult conversations that we need to have, right? What does the compromise look like? Yes, right now, the conversation is framed around VAT. in terms of generating more revenue for the state. But should it be a VAT versus SRD grant debate? Is that the conversation that we should be having? And how else then can we be supporting those that we know are unemployed in our country, are struggling? This grant is used mostly to buy food, to buy electricity. So is it, it seems that it's no longer an option for this grant to be removed. But what then are we willing to compromise as a society? How else should we be looking at some of these things? That's part of the conversation that I want us to have. Because in the next couple of years, all things remaining the same, you're going to have more people that need support via SRD. And then what do we do? What are the sustainable solutions that we need to be looking at in terms of social protection and welfare in our country? I'll take your calls on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. Remember, it is your National Roundtable. Coming up on the show today, the second hour, we're going to be looking at whistleblowers and where we are in terms of the laws that have been enacted to protect whistleblowers, and why we are seeing that it seems there is such little protection for those who do raise their hands. It follows, of course, the news of the devastating killing of Pamela Mabini. The details around it are just heartbreaking. She, of course, was the whistleblower in the Timothy Omotoso matter that has been before the courts for years now and killed outside her home, very brutally so, this past week. And then for the final hour of the show, do you remember the visuals of the fecal matter that was thrown at the statue of Cecil John Rhodes? It was unbelievable at the time. Chumani Makwele was the one that was leading that charge. It's 10 years ago, 2015. It led to the hashtag Rhodes Must Fall movement. The final hour of the show, we're going to be reflecting on Rhodes Must Fall and where we are with that conversation around decolonizing our institutions of higher learning. Fees Must Fall also followed hot on the heels of that. So we can have multiple conversations. It is your open line. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. 086 000 2032.
Day 15. Location undisclosed. Mood brave. Music Eye of the Tiger. Dear Diary, it's been 2 weeks of epic challenges against some of the most memorable and epic Survivor contestants. I have endured some harsh weather conditions, unbelievable drama, and these fire tokens have given me and the other contestants a second chance to stay in the game. Food. I feast on the defeat of my enemies. Vumi over there is busy planning and scheming, thinking that he can get me off the island. Never mind though. I will win this and take home $2 million. We're gonna be rich, Papa.
Rich Goopy Wanapolani, are you doing that thing again? Come and get your dinner, Mr. Fake Diary Sessions. We're now on Survivor. Oh, the world will fall.
Catch Survivor Season 40, Winners at War, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Starts 27 February on S3. Open up. S3.
Whether it is a CCMA referral, problems with a mechanic, or unfair blacklisting, Clientele legal plans are affordable, and you receive up to 670,000 rands worth of legal services per year. We cover civil, criminal, and labor-related matters. Our legal team will be your support 24 hours a day. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and a licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Oh, we're starting the show with some good news, at least starting the open line with some good news this morning. No Blue Monday for us today. Our first caller on the line is Cathy Mohlahlana. So you'd remember, on Valentine's Day, we received a call from one of our listeners who spoke about his neighbors and how in love his neighbors were. And they got married but were never able to go on honeymoon. And he talks about how, this is a couple where they're living with disability and they've become such an inspiration to the community around them. And he asked if there was anything that could be done to help celebrate them and celebrate their love. Cathy, good morning to you. Welcome to the Talking Point.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Firstly, did your neighbor come to you and tell you that he was going to call on the open line and try and see if there would be anyone who would raise their hand to help you guys celebrate your love?
No, he didn't tell us. It was a surprise when he told us that he won something for us. It was a surprise, honestly. He didn't say anything.
Did you know that you were inspiring him so much that, and the rest of the community, that when they look at you guys, they just think, wow, I want a love like that?
No, we don't know. We just try to live as normal as possible. So we don't know whether people are looking at us or we just try to find happiness. That's it.
So I think my producers have told you what the, well, I wouldn't say a prize, but the gesture that has been made, that you and your husband are going to be gifted with a Sanctuary Mandela voucher. And understand that it's going to be your anniversary coming up next month.
Yes, we got married on Easter 2023. So, yeah, this will be our first honeymoon. We never got the chance to go to honeymoon because both of us were not working.
And how long have you been together, Cathy?
Yo, we've been together since I was in matric. That's 2011, yes.
Oh, since 2011. So you guys are actually high school sweethearts, hey?
Yes.
I can hear you. I can hear your husband in the background, and I understand he's visually impaired.
Yes, he's visually impaired, and I'm living with albinism.
Yeah, and I understand that you just do such a great job, Cathy, of making sure he's supported in the best way possible.
Yes, no, I am trying because I went to school whereby I attended my my classes with people who are totally blind. So when I met him, he had a sight, but when he was busy attending his when we had doctor's visit, they told him that he won't reach 40. So when I think he was 30 something, I don't remember. So we got into the accident. 2013. Yeah, 2013. That time I was 5 months pregnant. We got into an accident. Then that's when he lost his eyesight completely.
Oh, that must have been devastating for both of you. But your love has been able to prevail through it all.
Yes, yes.
How are you feeling about your voucher?
Yo, I'm so happy. I can't wait. I'm so happy. I can't wait to go there. They even send us the link to view on YouTube. Yo, the place is beautiful.
That's wonderful, Cathy. We're so happy for you, and we're truly grateful to our friends at the Sanctuary Mandela who have made this voucher available. So, Cathy, continue taking care of each other, and hopefully the next time we have you guys on, it will be 10-year anniversary celebration, 20-year anniversary celebration, right?
Yes, definitely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cathy. Take care, Cathy Mohlahlana. I mean, it was just such a wonderful gesture, right? that was made by their neighbor, and we're glad that we were able to at least offer support. And I know many of you were really touched by their story. Zalma, my TD for today's, she's getting goosebumps. She feels like, she's also ready for love. That love will locate her where she is. Let me go to Stutterheim. Warren, good morning.
Good morning to Cathy and all the listeners. Cathy, it's about this electronic voting versus the ballot. My wife's German, and we followed the German election quite keenly in a way. They've got 80 million people in their population, of which 73% voted, okay, by ballot. Compare this with the American, and there was no problems in Germany. It took about 2 days for the results to come out, and you know what the results are. Remember, if you can go onto the electronic side, the fiasco with America in the last two ballots electronically. In even highly sophisticated systems like America, like Germany, I think the ballot, which is a true reflection, you can see what the person, you can't see a person's name, you can see exactly where they put. If they've spoiled the paper, they've gone across. If they've gone yay or nay, you can see it. And this is the way I think this country should work. It's all very well going for electronics. That is a very, very, very expensive method. And somebody will score highly, possibly.
Yeah. Look,
So
Warren,
they
I'm actually quite interested in the fact that, you cite Germany and your wife being from Germany, because Germany is one of the countries that had adopted electronic voting and then later abandoned it just due to some of the challenges that arose. And did you guys have to go through that at all? Was your
No.
wife keen to try it out?
No, you see, what happens is that she's got a permanent resident. I'm South African, born in Cape Town. She's got a permanent residence visa here from Germany. She's a German citizen still. And she has to use, until they've changed it, the old green book. We've applied. No, I've got my normal card, okay, South African citizen, born, etc. But until they've changed that system, she still has to have this green book, which is bulky, and you have to keep it safe, otherwise it falls apart, as you know. So, no, the question to answer yourself is, she can't vote. Well, she could, but it would be very complicated. She'd have to go to a German consul.
Okay. Okay.
Terribly complicated. We start out. We're in the Bundus, girl. In the Bundus.
All right, Warren, point taken. Warren out in Stutterheim. But yeah, Germany, of course, had also faced incredible legal challenges when it came to the e-voting system. There were issues around, technical and also some of the infrastructure problems. And Warren is right. It is very, very expensive to roll out. Well, we'll continue having the conversation on the open line. For now, let's take you to the latest news headlines.
The Full Circle.
Good morning. In the headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa has lauded the late dramatist, novelist and actor Ethel Fugard, who passed away yesterday at the age of 93. The president has described him as an extraordinary storyteller in extraordinary times and the moral conscience of a generation. South Africa's Electoral Commission will start a public conversation about the possibilities of electronic voting through an e-voting conference in Cape Town today until Wednesday. The conference will facilitate informed national dialogue on the feasibility, sustainability and policy implications of electronic voting. And Syria's interim president says he has formed an independent committee to investigate the killing of hundreds of civilians in Latakia and Tartus provinces, home to many supporters of the former President Assad. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Good morning, our Cathy and SAFM listeners. This is Nkunzi from Kwatema. I think the government must increase VAT on alcohol and cigarettes. That's 370 that you are talking about, my sister. The fact on the ground here in the location, most people, they just drink that money, my sister. They spend it on alcohol. I can say 70% here in my location. That money, some they buy drugs, these nyapes, some they just spend it on alcohol.
Good morning, Kate. Why can't we take austerity measures on the salaries of the MPs? They are too exorbitant. There is too much there. They need to deduct it and assist. Why look at making poor people more poor than these people who are getting a lot of money to deduct from them? A lot of money we must deduct from them. How do you feel about that? Not what the ladies mean.
Hi, Cathy. Bantum Chiselwa here. I am so confused with this whole debate around VAT and also a COVID relief program. How did they get to that point comparing these two? The funny thing is that they do not reflect on the money that is lost through corruption, through government officials, and also looking at all these deputy ministry positions. How about cutting down the expenses that they incur unnecessarily as the government before they start looking at oppressing the people even further? That is just ridiculous.
Morning, Cathy. Good morning, SFM, your listeners. I think the best way with this SRD grant that they're going to make permanent now, the best way is we must come to the table. Back in the days, people, they could have grown their own vegetables at the backyard, all those things they could have done. But then all of a sudden they come with this, this bird flu. I'm not sure where this was coming from, but, there's things of taking that away, Cathy, from the people where they could grow their own vegetables, all those small little things, gardenings, and those kind of things. It took a lot of weight away from the people. They could have cooked their own meals and stuff. But nowadays, you don't have even a little yard in your backyard anymore. So this is all the things that contributed to where we are now. But thanks, Kepi, Pirat, and George.
All right, thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes. And Gerard, I think that's part of the conversation, right? To say, how else do we sustainably offer support and offer social protection to those that need it the most in the country? Yes, we absolutely need some level of protection. I'm one of those that feels that, we do need that security net. But we must also think about what that means for the future. All things remaining equal. All things remaining equal being that nothing changes in the economy. The growth rate projections remain what they are. Anonymous, you're in Soweto. You also want to touch on the issue of the VAT increase.
Yes, good morning, Cathy. Mine is going to be unpopular. I was thinking that maybe the government must think about giving the child support grant to the firstborn child only. Because now, with all these children getting the support grant, you find an unmarried woman having 2 or 3 children, and depending on this grant, I think parents must prepare for their children and know that when they make children, it's going to be their responsibility and not expect any help from the government except for the firstborn child only. That is my suggestion.
Anonymous, how do you think one would be able to sort of determine that? Is it firstborn child for the female, firstborn child for the male? And how would you justify that constitutionally? Because the Constitution says everybody has a right to access social protection and social welfare.
I think this would apply to the woman, Cathy, because most of the time the children stay with the women. You know, we find women staying with children and the fathers not being there, you know. So the firstborn child of the woman would be the only one eligible to grant, because if she gets the second child, then she must know that she and the father of the child must be responsible for that child and all the children that come after. That's my suggestion, Cathy.
Okay, Anonymous out in Soweto, you've heard Anonymous' suggestion. Give a child grant to firstborns only. Yeah, I don't know if that kind of criteria would make it past the Constitutional Court. I mean, if the criteria currently for the SRD grant is where it is, where the court has found that it's unconstitutional, yes, that legal challenge continues. But yeah, I don't know if that's going to pass constitutional muster. Job, you're in Matatiele. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Cathy. How are you, my sister?
Good, go for it.
No, fine. Cathy, I just wanted to find out, some weeks or months back, you were extensively investigating and interviewing the people of some of Matatiele about the shenanigans of the mayor. Now it has been developed that he was arrested on Sunday or Saturday and released on a warning. But we have not heard anything. What we want to know is the COGTA MBC, with recommendations from Minister of COGTA National, was supposed to investigate all the matters, but he has failed to do that. We want answers as to why the COGTA MEC has failed to listen to the cries of the people of Matatiele, number one. Number two, Cathy, I remember on the show that time we were listening, I think it was about maybe 1 month or something. You interviewed the mayor. We want to know, if he was arrested, is he going to step aside? Or is he going to continue, and is he going to be favored as he's being favored even in the last couple of months? What is the development on that?
So, Job, do you have any idea what he was arrested for? What charges he's facing?
No, we don't know, because even the local journalists have been threatened. They can't write about him. You understand? They've been threatened. They can't write about him. No one knows. We are being told. No one is saying anything because they are fearful. So, because of your probing last time, it has led to this, because it was on a national attention as it is now. So we are asking you, please, to help us. What is going on? Even if you can ask the ANC, is he stepping aside, or is it going to be a secret matter? You are arrested on the weekend and are released the same day. Going to court, maybe, I think, on Tuesday.
Okay, look, Job, we'll have to look into it, right, and first verify that, in fact, he was arrested. Because right now all we're going with is sort of what you say you have heard going around in the community. So we'll have to follow up on that, and I'm hoping that we'll have an update maybe before the end of the show, but otherwise I will bring the update tomorrow morning.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you very much. Appreciated.
All right, Job out in Matatiele. And yeah, that is one of the municipalities we've been paying attention to on Municipal Watch. And yeah, they've had a number of issues. I think we've interviewed that mayor probably twice, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll have to find out if, in fact, he has been arrested. Nhlanhla, you're in KZN. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister Cathy. Thank you for taking my call. You see, my sister, I've got a problem with this issue of digitization of voting. The thing is, voting is meaningless in a country where human rights are being violated left and right. Whether we've got a digital system of voting or a manual voting system, the question is, how many people from today have got airtime in their cell phone? That will tell you how many people will be able to vote with that system of digitization. And how many? And do we have enough signal across the country to cover all the people who will want to vote? Before we get to speak about digitization, I think those are the things we need to address. And address the issue, the issue of voting. Does it bring a meaningful to the people on the ground, or does it make meaningful to the politicians that we vote to get to bring the same basic human rights or of the same voters that the people that the people vote for them?
But Nhlanhla, is it not worth looking into what the options or even modalities could be, especially because we have an ever-increasing number of entrants in the political space, whether we're talking political parties, independent candidates. You know, we all know how much longer our ballot paper was last year versus any other year.
My sister, they're talking about printing 900 million papers, if I'm not mistaken, but to have 900 population people, that's an unnecessary expenditure, that tells you. We've got a parliament that is full of incompetent people who don't know what they're doing, who want to steal money. That's all they want. With this issue of digital system, they are interested in getting tenders from the people who are going to provide this service.
Okay, all right, Nhlanhla. That's Nhlanhla's view out in KZN. As you can hear, quite skeptical about the process. I think, it's about us knowing, understanding what are other countries doing out there, and then being able to make a decision about whether this is something that would practically work for us. I'm always one to keep an open mind to hearing different ideas and arguments around it before just saying, no, let's not even open that door or entertain that option at all. Let me go to Butana. Butana, you are in Rosebank. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister. ANC is blackmailing us. It's emotional blackmail. I mean, they didn't have 40 billion, 3% of the payroll. They took money from education and other activities and put it on the payroll. Now they say, now if they can't get that 2%, what is going to happen? That 3% is going to disappear? But not blackmail us. There's a lot of fat on government portfolios. They can cut there. They can cut. Why can't they cut there and raise that 2%? Why should we? They've been blackmailing poor people for 30 years. It's enough now. They're not stupid.
So I guess, Butana, you're basically saying that if we're to talk about increasing VAT or getting rid of the SRD grant, because as South Africans we know the impact that grant is having on people's lives, then it means we might be more amenable to a VAT increase because we don't want them to get rid of the SRD grant. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying they must not use that grant to blackmail us. They can cut on number of fats on that government portfolios. I'm saying they must not use those poor people.
Yes.
You know, my sister, they didn't have 40 billion last time. They hoping the consultants going to vote for them in government. That did not happen. And now they have to cut money from different portfolio. And they said there's a shortage of budget. It was not shortage of budget. They have to put the money on payroll. They must cut in other areas and give those poor people that money. And it doesn't mean any impact. It doesn't make any impact, actually, that money. It's an insult to poor people. Why can't they create jobs? Why can't they solve the problem in economy? Why can't they solve a crime? Now they could, actually it's afterthought. They could have motivated that before. So irritating that they think that you can't think properly.
Butana, I understand you loud and clear, and I think, yeah, I tend to agree with part of what you're saying, that it is somewhat of emotional blackmail, right? That either this or that, and you know, it is a very emotive issue.
You've got hard choices, really. Before it was not.
Okay. All right, Butana out in Rosebank. Thanks for calling in. Lisiba, you're in Polokwane. Good morning.
Good morning, says Katie. You're speaking to Lisiba in Khovakwane. That's Kukun, says Katie.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Says Katie, you see, the people does not have a problem. We don't have a problem with any increase, as long as it's been properly communicated to us. Because these political parties, prior to elections, they will promise free without necessarily telling the voters how are they going to raise the money to finance that policy. The policy that has not been budgeted for, once you introduce it, it becomes a lot of problem. What I'm suggesting now, let the government first look at the expenditures that are there, the wastages. Let's try and recover the money that has been stolen through corruption, in particular, full implementation of state capture, follow all the monies that have been stolen all over the show, and check which areas that we can cut. When you look, except touching the SRD grant, you've got the cabinet that is bloated, that we cannot even sustain it. So these are some of the areas that we need to consider and make sure that all members of national government agree to it and led by, not by the Minister of Finance, but by the SARS Commissioner, Keith Sweater, because it shows that the people are really confident, because he says there is a lot of money that is all over, that we just need to strengthen SARS. Once we strengthen SARS, we know where we are going to get the money without necessarily increasing VAT. Even if VAT we are going to increase it, you cannot just increase abruptly like 2%. Let's increase gradually, but make sure that the people of the country understand and even listen to them when they say you spend a lot of money on foreigners. When you talk foreigners, we talk, some are in the social grant system, some are queuing very long queues on the hospital. You spend lots of money in the departments than the money that we are going to spend on South Africans. Those things, we must look at them, because people are a little bit wiser after Trump presidential win, because now he's talking to the Americans. Let the South African government talk to the South African so that the budget can be sufficient for the South African citizens.
All right, Lisiba out on Khobokwane. You heard him there. Nothing wrong with increases, he says, at least to VAT, as long as there is proper communication. Yeah, well, but if in a couple of years' time we're sitting on an overall increase of 2.5%, does that make it more okay than it is now? All things remaining equal? I don't know. Mike, you're in Newlands. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. And I have to say that the thread that seems to run through all your callers all the time, most of the time, is jobs. It all comes down to work. So I was very disappointed this morning when I heard on SAFM that the President is now going to enact the expropriation without compensation law and apply it to empty buildings in Johannesburg. And the thought that went through my head was, I can just see the headlines in America and around the rest of the world. Expropriation begins. President starts in the city. Where next? You know, I just can't believe that we keep trying to destroy, or the ANC seems to want to just destroy our country completely. He signs this letter signed by Malaysia and three other countries which are clearly anti-USA, writing against Israel, which is America's ally. He insults the president. What is going on with the ANC? Are they actually on a mission to destroy as many jobs as possible? Because AGOA is going to leave us, it seems. And that's, I believe, anything from 100,000. Some people speculate 200,000 direct and indirect jobs. But
Mike, let's go back to the issue that you started off with, which is around the unoccupied buildings in Johannesburg, or rather the hijacked buildings in Johannesburg. So why do you think that it would be wrong for some of these buildings to be expropriated in the first place?
Well, no, I certainly don't think it would be wrong, Cathy, but there's a procedure in place and always has been. I can only relate to the Western Cape where I live. We have a building not far from, it's about 6 km from where I am. It's going to be expropriated by the city of Cape Town because the owners of the building have allowed it to become a slum. It's got 70 or 80 illegal immigrants in it. They haven't paid their rates and taxes, so the city went to court. They got a court order. They're taking over the building. They're going to sell the building to recover the money that they've lost in rates and taxes, and the building is going to be demolished and developed by a developer. It's that simple. It's not a complicating thing, and everybody is happy. But in Johannesburg, we have to say, the president has to say, without compensation. Why does he have to say that? It just doesn't make sense. Why doesn't he just go down the same process that we use in the Western Cape, and as far as I know, the rest of the country used to use and could still use if they want to? Nothing stopping any city from taking a building over if they default on their rates and taxes.
So, Mike, are you saying that he mustn't speak about it? He must rather just do it?
Well, Cathy, I'm just a desperate man. Unfortunately, the cat is out the bag now, and no matter what we say, nobody is going to convince me or the rest of the world otherwise. We have expropriation without compensation. This country is going to pay a heavy price for it. We've passed the law, so I suppose we might as well talk about it. But I'm just so desperate, and I'm so tired of the unemployment figures. We're going to lose jobs, Cathy. We've lost 6 million jobs in the last 7 or 8 years, and we are going to, when that goes, another, 300,000 jobs.
Yeah,
we've lost. It just goes on and on, Cathy. I'm not hearing anything from the ANC to say, hang on a second. I'll tell you what, let's not piss off America, anybody. Let's just stay out of everybody's affairs. Let's not get stuck into Israel. It's got nothing to do with it. Let's take that billion rand we spent or we're going to spend on further court action and give it to our poor people and get some industry going. Let's stick our nose in our own affairs and leave everybody else alone. But that doesn't seem to be the ANC's policy.
All right. Okay.
Thanks, Cathy.
Mike out in Newlands. And that, of course, is following the statements made by the president last week, where he said the Expropriation Act should be used to actually reclaim some of the hijacked buildings. I don't know, Mike, because ultimately, the state still has to get on with the job of doing the work it needs to do. And we know, with the state of the inner city being what it is, many of those buildings, they even when the buildings are reclaimed and they're sold and they're renovated and, sold off to private partners, whatever the case is, some of the monies lost in rates and taxes are never going to be made back because of just how long this has been going on for. So should we say that we don't deal with the problem because we are afraid of misinformation and those who create and spread false narratives doing that? I don't know. Then it means that much of what the state has to do, it has to second guess itself and not do the work for fear of reprisal or for fear of, but what if it's misinterpreted? If we know that due process is being followed, then what do we have to worry about? The concern will be if there isn't due process that is followed. Dumi, you are in Midrand. Good morning.
Hello, dear. Hello to the listeners. My concern is the money that is unaccounted for in this country. I think it's high time we go back to the drawing board and they tell us exactly how much they collect and how much is distributed in all the departments. I'll give you an example. Traffic tickets. You know the amount of money they collect from traffic tickets in the whole country. We don't know how much they get and where it's going. Every single car that is on the road, every day, is renewing the disc. Those are billions of monies. We have places like your 3 Randavels and all that where you don't need maintenance, and there is billions of people who are going there every week. Where are those monies going? And then there is also billions that you hear about the tender fraud. Hey, this company was given $1 billion to do this. They didn't do it. Now they are going to court. So do you see, there is a lot of money that is going around the country. Billions that you don't know when was it allocated for whatever that is there. Secondly, this whole thing of US is quite interesting because all these years, they never actually told us that they are receiving monies, funding and all that. It's only now when Trump is stopping it, we start hearing about all these fundings that they've been receiving.
No, but to me, that's not true, though. That's not true. At some point, when it comes to the PEPFAR program in particular, it was a significant contributor to even the treatment subsidization for those with HIV/AIDS. But the government then prioritized the coverage of that treatment fully coming out of, our state coffers.
Yes, that we know, and I remember that. But what I'm trying to say is that normally when it's a budget speech, we need to have details of everything. There is a lot that is not explained to the nation. There is a lot in the money that is going up and down and all these stories and all this. Like I heard in the morning about the issue of electricity. I mean, that money should have not been taken at the first place because we know that coal that is leaving this country going to all the countries outside, which is the best coal, it's actually a lot. So we are sending coal somewhere, but we are being told to close the mines that are actually taking care of this country. So there is a lot that is going on, but I think it's time that we as a nation get a platform to talk about this, like you are doing now.
Okay.
You have opened the best platform for the nation to open up and talk.
All right, do me out in Midrand. Thanks there
Thank
for your input on the issue of the budget speech. Yeah, I do think that we do need a more transparent process when it comes to budgeting. The finance minister, of course, disagrees with that particular view. He says it needs to be as closed as possible due to market sensitivity, because there are things that could be discussed that would lead to either positive, negative reactions out of the markets. Do we fully buy that story? Are there no ways of working around that? And if a country like the US can do open budgeting, why can't we?
Morning, Cathy. This country is not ready for the e-vote. Look what is happening for many years in Home Affairs. Wrong spelled names and surnames, date of birth, gender, registration of children for grade 1 and 8. In EFSAS, the list is endless, and also corruption, registration of sponsorship. So it will take time. Look at the rural area people. Let's start with the cleaning of our country that is debt and aging. Fight crime, control borders, water, sanitation, roads. The list is endless, Cathy. Thank you.
Good morning, Cathy. This is Peter in Hartswater. Cathy, now we have a useless government that cannot generate or create jobs for the people rather than threatening the recipients of SRD grant. Why can't they create jobs? And now let me tell you, Cathy, this tax is not for SRD grant. This tax is for Glencoe. Because he said that the minister that people in their mind, they don't do money now. He mentioned Glencoe, and we all know who's got the shares in Glencoe. Thank you.
All right, those are your contributions on the open line. Can you believe it? The hour's up already. Time for the latest 10 o'clock news update.
In our top stories, President Ramaphosa pays tribute to Ethel Fugard and IEC holds e-voting conference in Cape Town. Good morning. President Cyril Ramaphosa has lauded the late dramatist, novelist and actor Ethel Fugard, who passed away yesterday at the age of 93. The president has described him as an extraordinary storyteller in extraordinary times and the moral conscience of a generation. Fugard's worldview was shaped by his time working as a clerk in the Native Commissioner's Court in Johannesburg in the late 1950s. He then went on to write plays such as The Island, Sizwe Banzi's Dead, No Good Friday and Master Harold and the Boys, which depict the cruelty and dehumanization wrought by the apartheid system. He was renowned for collaborating across the colour divide at a time when this was prohibited and founded several theatre companies alongside black actors. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya.
Beyond the impressive body of work that he has left behind, Ethel Fugard will be remembered for being an outlier amongst the millions of white South Africans who blithely turned a blind eye to the injustice being perpetrated in their name. As a country, we are grateful that we were able to honor the legendary Ethel Fugard during his lifetime with the National Order of Ikhamanga in silver.
South Africa's Electoral Commission will start a public conversation about the possibilities of electronic voting through an e-voting conference in Cape Town starting today until Wednesday. The conference will facilitate informed national dialogue on the feasibility, sustainability and policy implications of electronic voting. It will also launch a discussion document that will explore the crucial aspects related to electronic voting and the implications for South Africa. The IEC CEO Saima Mabolo says the possibilities of e-voting are worth discussing.
The conference is making an inquiry. It's going to be debating those issues. Are we ready? Is the digital infrastructure in the country, does it lend itself to this type of implementation of e-voting? So we really, and secondly, National Treasury is going to be part of the debate to look at the affordability of implementation of e-voting.
The KwaZulu-Natal Transport MEC Sibuniso Duma is currently visiting the site of the N2 bus crash which claimed the lives of 9 people. The crash happened between Mandeni and Stanger. The 88-seater bus is believed to have plummeted down a steep embankment after a tyre burst. The bus was ferrying members of the 12 Apostle in Trinity Church from Richards Bay to Shaka's Kraal near Kwadukuza. Duma says an investigation is underway into the cause of the crash.
It's a painful tragedy of the Church of TAC. The mayor of Duguza is part and parcel of the church, and some of his relatives were also affected. Fortunately for now, there is no one who has lost a life in the family. So at this point in time, we are told already 9 people have lost their lives. We are told of a story of a tire that burst, so we are not just going to say. You might find that there is a speed, you might find that the driver did not take a proper caution, you might even find that there was an overload, so we are not just going to dwell on so much up until the proper investigation has been done.
Meanwhile, the mayor of the Kwadukuza local municipality, Muzi Mkiti, has expressed shock following the deaths of 9 people in the horrific bus accident. He says the municipality will reach out and assist the families of the deceased.
This is a provincial road and quite a number of accidents have happened here in the same spot and people have died here. But I have contacted the office of the MEC. I think that we will need to engage further with the Honorable MEC. Something will need to be done. We will need some sort of a court intervention because you could see that week in, week out or monthly an accident will happen in this area, in this road. I think we are going to be engaging the MEC. We need to then reach out to the families and try and assist the families of the deceased.
And finally, Syria's interim president says he has formed an independent committee to investigate the killing of hundreds of civilians in Latakia and Tertis provinces, home to many supporters of the former President Assad. Ahmed al-Shara insists that those responsible will face the law following growing international condemnation of the violence.
I can confirm that we will hold accountable, firmly and without leniency, anyone involved in the bloodshed of civilians or harming our people, who overstepped the powers of the state or exploited their authority for their own ends. No one is above the law. Anyone with Syrian blood on their hands will face justice sooner rather than later.
Recapping the top story, President Cyril Ramaphosa has lauded the late dramatist, novelist and actor Ethel Fugard, who passed away yesterday at the age of 93. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Dr. Nikki Alexander, Dr. Thomas Chamberlain, and Dr. Jack Hodgson form a dedicated team of forensic pathologists who try to work out how and why the victim died. This series sees Nikki investigate a murder that's a carbon copy of a case from her past. She soon suspects that the killings are personal to her. But who will believe her? Meanwhile, Jack creates tension when he finds himself aligned with a police complaints investigator over the accidental shooting of a girl by armed police. And a seemingly random killing in the remote countrysides leads Nikki and Jack into the dangerous underbelly of a criminal world. This is Silent Witness, Thursdays and Fridays at 10 p.m. Starts 20 February only on S3. Open up.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
Yeah. I understand as well regarding the hijacked buildings there. You know, you mentioned the one, the Cape Gullis, but there are others that were owned by the city, but some of them had electricity fitted in, and there were illegal electricity. Some of them were cut off. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. The other one is my building, but they actually invaded it before my time. So we went to court.
Your own building, yeah. I mean, I get it.
It's my building, that thing. There's my central fire station, and that thing is closed. It's gonna fall. So I went there to address them. Gary, no, we want to give an alternative accommodation, but they refused. So we said, okay, we're gonna go to court, and then so that we can ask for evacuation and then put the people there, you know. So, but they didn't want to listen. That building was closed because it's sinking. There's a sinkhole there.
MMC for Public Safety in the city of Joburg, Dr. Mtrini Chwaku.
You're listening to the National Pulse.
It was fast, easy, and he gave me the best quote. My savings is 644 rand. Come join our insurance and save some money.
Nice one, Lebo. Saving 644 Rand a month on your 2019 Mazda CX-3 would also make you so happy you might drop a beat. Outsurance clients know what it feels like to be on the winning side. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. Switch and save today. Outsurance is always looking for ways to save you money. They are also committed to settling valid claims fairly and quickly. No hassles.
You know your claim is going to be taken care of and you've got support along the journey.
SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
The citizens are not willing to settle for anything less than a win.
And now it's with Haaland and on to Foden. Foden to finish the game. And he does.
However, the Seagulls want to triple their efforts to collect valuable points against reigning champs.
Lovely touch for Mitoma. Mitoma could be away. Here it is. Mitoma one-on-one. Mitoma, delightful.
This is the Premier League. Witness the superb contest, Manchester City FC versus Brighton and Hove Albion FC on Saturday, 15 March at 4:30 p.m. Live on S3. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
This Human Rights Month, SAFM is deepening a culture of social justice and human rights. It's a time to reflect, engage,
and take action for a more just society. From thought-provoking discussions to powerful stories, SAFM is leading the conversations that move us, because your voice matters, your rights matter, and together we shape a better future. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. Welcome to the second hour of the show. It's 11 after 10 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, we'll be looking at strengthening laws to protect whistleblowers, but I guess maybe even going beyond that, because we have had some amendments when it comes to some of the protections for whistleblowers. The problem is around the implementation, right? The biggest problem is that we see very little enforcement and protections being offered to whistleblowers. And that's the conversation we'll have in this hour. We'll be joined by a member of the Portfolio Committee on Justice. We'll also be joined by the Deputy Director General in the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, looking at this issue. And we'll hear then from the police, as well as those that are working within the space, particularly supporting whistleblowers and social justice activists. Right? If somebody is fighting for better rights for their community, for themselves, why should this person be a target of crime? Why does this person not deserve to live? Why does their voice not deserve to be heard? Because that is the message that is being communicated when we see the killings of some of the country's activists. So we'll have that conversation shortly. For now, just a couple of your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line.
Morning, Cathy. Vincent Rismat here in Midrand. Cathy, you know what they say? Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, you feed him for life. So instead of extending this grant and making it permanent, why don't they just create jobs for these people so that these people can fend for themselves and earn the money and be taxed so that the economy can be a bit at ease? Thank you, Cathy. Vincent here.
Hey, Cathy. You know, the increases, whether in tax or VAT or whatever, I don't have an issue with as a taxpayer. What I have an issue with is perpetual increases. So if you're going to raise VAT with 1%, for me, you need to say it's for how many years? You must say it's for 1 year, it's for 2 years, and this is how much I'm going to collect, and this is what I am going to do with the money. For an example, if they can say they're raising it for 2 years, they want to pay off the loans, and this is how much they're going to raise. And they must come back to us and say, we have raised so much money and we've paid a particular loan. This thing of just increases and then we just wait, it's the same as the increases of the toll gates. You just don't know where the money goes, but there's always increases that are just never ending. And you don't even know how much they are collecting. Thanks, it's Bongi.
Morning, my sister. It's MVP. You know, the idea of South Africans being negative on anything that is proposed, I think it emanates on the corruption that they've seen over the years whenever something new is being introduced. We need to get rid of corrupt individuals in the government and, you know, in our municipalities, so that we bring that trust from the communities, so that they give sort of like a thought to whatever that is being proposed. Because, I mean, as we're talking about electronic voting, people are now thinking that somebody is eyeing money out of this particular project.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Well, let's get into our conversation for this hour. Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mamoloko Kubai, being among those that have condemned the brutal killing of another whistleblower and community activist, Pamela Mabini. She was murdered on Friday in Gqeberha, and it has sparked outrage and, of course, continues then to shed light on the issue of social justice activists that are targeted and, in some instances, even killed. One of the things that the minister raised was a need to review the legislation to close some of the loopholes that hinder the safeguarding of community activists, whistleblowers, witnesses. You remember recently we had that witness that was killed outside the court in Soweto. And that, of course, is part of this conversation. So let's then look at where we are in terms of some of the killings that we have seen historically of social justice activists, of whistleblowers, and how it is that these cases are dealt with, number one. But number two, where are we in terms of the legislation that the country has developed to protect whistleblowers? Why is there the sense that whistleblowers are no better off today than they were before? Ola Ngola is the chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development. Ola, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to your listeners.
Kelly Pillay is the Deputy Director General for Legislative Development in the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Kelly, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on, Kelly. John Clark is a social worker that supports whistleblowers and also a social justice activist. John, good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be with the good company. Thank you.
And Major General Richard Shibiri is the component head for organized crime investigations at SAPS. Major General Shibiri, good morning to you.
Good morning to you and the listeners.
John, I want to perhaps begin with you because this is work that you are dealing with sort of directly on a day-to-day basis. We are seeing this increase of attacks, or at least what feels like anyway an increase of attacks on those that are brave enough to speak out against whatever injustice they see in their communities, and of course, just the act of whistleblowing itself. When you look at the different examples that we have had in this country of such individuals being targeted to the point of being killed, some of these murders you can see are well planned, well orchestrated. Often these activists are going about their daily lives, right? We have examples of activists that, have had gunmen that walked into their homes and killed them in front of their children. We can look at the example of environmental activist Figile Nchangase, who was killed in her home, Epondweni, in 2020. And they killed her while she was making dinner for her family. And we can look at the likes of Bazooka Hadebe, also out in the Eastern Cape, shot 8 times. There's often something around the brutality of the killings that seems to say, or want to say to others, that if you are going to do what this person is doing, then you must be prepared to die a horrible death in the ways that we have seen.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Bazooka because I actually owe to him the sort of my activism. I mean, I didn't like to think of myself as an activist. I was a social worker in the background. We're not meant to be the story. But when he was killed in 2016, he being a close friend of mine and a whistleblower and somebody who had disclosed to me all sorts of wrongdoing with regard to the Kolobeni mining conflict. I realized I got to stick my head above the parapet. I got to find my voice. And in that sense, the brutality of it all was only an incentive for me to basically say, look, I'm sorry, if I'm going to stay in this country, I've got to live in this country, not some imagined sort of ideal country, and work towards using whatever I can of my relative privilege to ensure that those who are marginalized and disadvantaged can at least participate. Now, it's a shame to think that it takes those of us with white privilege who are having to do this after 30 years of democracy, but at the same time, let's do it. I mean, let's get on with it. And I would want to say that the reason the brutality of it all is in a paradoxical way indicator of how much they fear the truth. So they're wanting to deter any other people to do it. So, and that's why, because the problem when you speak truth to power is that power has no defense against truth. Therefore, it seeks to suppress it and smother it and kill it. All it serves to do is to make the truth even more self-evident. And I would want to put out word to the families of people who have died, particularly this latest tragedy with Pamela Mabini. I just can't imagine what her family are going through. But I would want to say it's up to those of us who are still alive, still have a voice, still whatever have at our disposal to use it to make sure that her death is not in vain. That any more than Bazuka Kadeba's death, Babita Diokara and all the others. We have a constitution and a Bill of Rights which enables us to exercise freedom of expression. So let's use it. And I'm really grateful to now be engaging with people in the system, as it were, in Parliament and in the structures and the police to say we need to work together in this. You know, up until now, it's been civil society and the media. People like you, Cathy, that have actually made the going here or made the running. We now need to ensure that we work collaboratively together under this new regime of governance for national unity.
John, before I move on to our other guests, I do believe that there is a particular context that many of our social activists find themselves in that is really worth paying attention to. Often these are individuals that are, number one, in a very precarious position. Some of the social activists who are working in communities are not necessarily earning salaries from any particular organizations. Even if they are the founders of organizations, these are often very under-resourced. And so there is a question, there is a vulnerability that many social activists are actually living in and exposed to, because they are, at the end of the day, ordinary members of the community that are just brave enough to be the ones that are the voices and the faces of certain struggles.
Yeah. And I mean, I have several people who are whistleblowers who are not yet public about it. And I've had to, provide my support for them. Fortunately, one of the advantages I have is I'm 68 this year, 69. And I can remember the apartheid era. And I remember how civil society mobilized against that and international support. And it's not, it's a bit of an indictment on this country that I'm having to find support for whistleblowers internationally, but at least it's coming so that to alleviate to some extent that hardship that they have to endure. But of course, that's limited. And of course, in the Trump era, unfortunately, I fear that support's going to be drying up as well. So we're on our own here, and let's kind of work together. Let's speed things up. And I'm dying to hear more from Calais and Kola about how we can ensure that the legislative process is that you can grease those wheels so that this legislation can get into place and that structures can be put in place. And I'm not just speaking for myself. Judge Zondo last week at the conference on whistleblowing made that point. He said he was personally prepared to contribute something of his salary to some sort of interim institutional support for whistleblowers because he just knows how desperate it is to secure our democracy.
Kola, let me come to you. From Parliament's point of view, is there that appreciation for the context that many whistleblowers find themselves in? That these are mostly ordinary people who are simply trying to get on with their lives, but oppressed by the injustices by the injustice that they see, and actually are brave enough to say or do something about it.
Yes, Cathy, there is that sort of appreciation, and the fact that we concede that we don't have a strong legal framework protecting whistleblowers as the law currently stands. Whistleblowing is only protected through the Protection of Disclosures Act, which basically confines itself within the workplace whistleblowing. And even so, it protects those whistleblow in the workplace only not to be abused in a form of dismissals and stuff. It doesn't go further to say if this person loses economic gains, or if this person's life is in threat, how do we then protect them? It further doesn't give a particular provision on how do we go about submitting and making it easy for those who whistleblow in a manner that which is protected. I think we do need to strengthen our legal framework in ensuring that we protect whistleblowers so that they get encouraged to go and whistleblow criminal activities, so as to help the state fight against illegal activities. Now, the president during SONA has made the commitment that they are going to submit to Parliament as the executive what they call the Protection of Whistleblowers Bill, which is going to be meant to protect those who whistleblow against any form of abuse, including loss of life. I think part of what we need to do as Parliament is to ensure that when we enact that law that strongly protects whistleblowers, we need to make it a Schedule 6 criminal offense to intimidate, to threaten a whistleblower, so that they feel comfortable and motivated to come and report criminal activities. And part of what is a very crucial aspect of the process of enacting law is to ensure that the public is actually allowed an opportunity to make submissions, so that even those who are affected from the community are able to make submissions to strengthen the bill to ensure that whistleblowers are protected. Because if we fail to protect whistleblowers in terms of enacting relevant laws, you risk that people of South Africa are going to be afraid to come forward with critical information that will help the state either for prevention of crime or for prosecution of crime. So as things stand, we don't really have a strong legal framework that protects. And you would imagine that SAT, Public Protector, SIU, NPA would actually be struggling as well in terms of actual implementation of how they protect the whistleblowers, because there is no strong law that guides them.
Why is it taking us so long as a country to get there, to a point where we do have clear and concise legislative framework around how to protect whistleblowers?
Look, sometimes, Katie, what influences law is what is happening in the communities, because law is made to protect the people of South Africa. There is a legal framework that which we now, having experienced these brutal killings of whistleblowers, we think that it is not enough. So there's been work that has been done even way before we even went to Parliament, in terms of the Labour Relations Act, the Witness Protection Act, the Protected Disclosures Act and stuff. But as time goes, you have got new phenomena, you have got new aspects of criminality in society, which maybe was not that much gruesome at that particular point when these laws were enacted. So hence we are saying, even as Parliament, now that we are experiencing a day-to-day brutal killing of whistleblowers. We then need to strengthen what we have. Maybe separate the entire protection of whistleblowers from other acts and make it specific about whistleblowers. Because we have got law enforcement agencies that might find difficulties in the current circumstances to protect whistleblowers because we don't have a strong legal framework.
Okay.
That matters.
All right, I'm going to ask you to pause it there. We'll continue the conversation and then bring in the voices of the DDG from the Justice Department and, of course, Major General Shibiri.
Thank you, Cathy. In the news headlines on SAFM, I am Ondela Mbana, and a very good morning. The Electoral Commission of South Africa will host an e-voting conference over the next 3 days in Cape Town to facilitate an informed national dialogue on the feasibility and policy implications of electronic voting in the country. President Cyril Ramaphosa has lauded the late dramatist, novelist and actor Ethel Fugard, who passed away yesterday at the age of 93. The president has described him as an extraordinary storyteller in extraordinary times and the moral conscience of a generation. And Chad has arrested a journalist it accuses of translating documents detailing operations conducted in Mali by Russian mercenaries. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 28 to the dollar, 23 rand 54 to the pound, and 19 rand 77 to the euro. Markets in Asia ended today's trading session in mixed terrain. The JSE lower during mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are trading higher. Gold is trading at $2,909. Platinum, $967 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $70.31 a barrel.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. We're looking at strengthening laws to protect whistleblowers and just where are we in this process. Joining us for this conversation, you've already heard from John Clark, who is a social justice activist, also supports whistleblowers. Ngola is the chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development. Kelly Pillay is the Deputy Director General for Legislative Development in the Department of Justice, and we're also joined by Major General Richard Shibiri, who is Component Head for Organised Crime Investigations at the SAPS. Kelly, a couple of years ago, the department, of course, published a discussion document that was to look at proposed reforms when it comes to the protection of whistleblowers. And this was a step that was highly welcomed because, I think most people acknowledge and agree that we do need a reformation on some of our laws around whistleblowing. Where did that process end up? Where are we today?
Thank you. May I come in?
Yes, you can go ahead, Kelly.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, the discussion document that was published for comment was quite a good document insofar as outlining what the challenges with the current legislation is. We did comparative research as well, but I do want to point out that the document hasn't ended at that point. There's still ongoing work in the development of a bill, but one of the processes that is very critical to the development of a bill is also its practical implementation after you pass it. And the big question around it is the affordability of implementing the bill and the cost implications. So we are currently carrying out a costing exercise insofar as how will we implement the bill and evaluating some of the proposals. So let's take, for instance, some of the proposals that have been made with regard to whistleblowing. And let's start off with the definition of a whistleblower. So the term whistleblower is currently being used very widely. We agree that in the current Protected Disclosures Act, restricting it to the work environment is very limiting, and it doesn't serve the cause of people who suffer after they have blown the whistle on some wrongdoing. But the question is, how far do you go, and who do you include within this broad framework of what is referred to as whistleblowers, who would then be entitled to the protections that are going to be put in place in terms of legislation. And then in terms of a further point is, if you're creating, one of the challenges that has been identified is that there isn't a single institution that has been identified as a champion for whistleblowers. And I think that is also very critical. It has been spoken about, because where do whistleblowers go when they need assistance, when they are being threatened, etc., and how do you facilitate them getting that assistance through the structures? And should you create a new structure, or do we use existing structures? And if you use an existing structures, that existing structure will have to be capacitated to take on this new role and to perform the work. Because I think laws are only as strong as its implementation is concerned. So the exercise we are currently doing is preparing that costing. And then the next phase would be to also secure the funding. And then I think we agree completely that the current law is limiting, and I think that it needs a review. But together with the the Protected Disclosures Act, we also have the Witness Protection Act, which is also a very resource-intensive process that requires a lot of funding to place people under protection. But there are different kinds of protection that a person can receive. So if you are regarded as a witness in terms of the Witness Protection Act, and a witness is defined quite broadly in that you are either a person who is or may be required to give evidence, or who has given evidence in any proceeding. So they are entitled to special protection in terms of that legislation, which is, as I mentioned, a resource-intensive process. And this is where the police also come in, because to fall within the category of a witness that needs to be in witness protection, there must be a risk assessment. And this talks to the practical measures that must currently be applied on when a person must be placed under witness protection. Is this person's life in danger? And does this person require protection where this person must be removed from the current environment and placed in a safe place? And those kind of issues that need to be answered. I hope I've answered some of the questions, Cathy, but if there's anything specific that you would like me to delve further into, I'll be happy to. Thank you.
Yes, please, Kelly. Thanks for that sort of overall look and roundup of just, what has gone into the discussion. I'm more curious to know, though, in as far as the consolidation of the work, and what is proposed. Are you, as the Justice Department, at a point where you believe that you are done in as far as what the reforms needed are? And maybe if you can talk us through some of those key reforms that you believe should be implemented, given that you're now at a point of actually costing what it will take to make this a reality.
Yes, sure. I've spoken to the first issue about the expansion of the term of a person who makes a protected disclosure. One of the big questions that we are facing with this piece of legislation is, should it actually be called Protected Disclosures Act, or should it be called something else, such as whistleblower protection? Because that would give it a broader meaning, and it would be more understandable and relatable to the context that we are trying to amend the legislation. But that piece of legislation would also have to cover within a certain chapter to deal with the employment environment as well. Because as we know, within an employment environment, there are also a lot of challenges with people to blow the whistle and they suffer what is currently referred to as occupational detriment. And there's also in the legislation that the person who faces occupational detriment, that they are left on their own when they face the occupational detriment to have to get a lawyer, go to the labor court, lodge a grievance and lodge a complaint, etc. And is there a way that we can make that simpler and also to tighten the provisions insofar as employers are concerned and to create that criminal offense where you act against an employee who is blowing the whistle against wrongdoing, because currently there isn't that offense, and now there is a suggestion that we include it as that we do create an offense in that regard. Then there's another issue with regard to the creation of a fund for whistleblowers to assist whistleblowers who have been dismissed in the workplace. Because once you've been dismissed, you have severe financial hardship, and how do we alleviate that? Then there's the other issue about detrimental action by fellow employees. This has also come up strongly in our consultation, that we talk only about the employer or a person in authority being the one who puts the person through this occupational detriment, whereas in a work environment you may also have fellow employees. So that is another kind of discussion that we want to, that is another discussion to be included in the document. And as I said, the creation of an offense where a person uses force, coercion, threats, intimidation, or any other coercive means against another person with intent to prevent that person or influence that person to refrain from making a disclosure. I've spoken to the issue of legal assistance, and one of the issues that we are looking at is if we are to create a new entity to champion the cause of whistleblowing. That is going to be a very costly exercise. And as I said, we need to look at the affordability of this new piece of legislation. And can we not look at one of the existing organizations that currently receive protected disclosures? And those are the Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector, the Commission for Gender Equality, the Commission for Cultural Rights, the Public Service Commission, and the Auditor General. Now, recently, when we amended the legislation in 2021, we added another 33 organizations where people can make those disclosures. And expanding it to that extent, there wasn't a requirement for the creation of more funding because people would be free to we rendered that process of making disclosures to certain organizations more accessible. And so to bring it down to what we are talking about today is we want to create more enhanced powers so that we could regard a single organization as a champion of the rights for whistleblowers. So those are some of the discussions. And yes.
Major General Shibiri, the limitations of the legal framework around whistleblowers, how does that impact then how the South African Police Service does its work, and how then you respond to some of these cases? Because one of the complaints that is often leveled is that these cases are not properly investigated, especially where there is ongoing intimidation, harassment. The murder cases, of course, there are complaints there around the extent to which there are often very few breakthroughs in identifying culprits and bringing suspects to book.
Thank you, Cathy. The South African Police Service, when dealing with whistleblowers, we mostly deal with those who become witness on the cases we're investigating. And when we become aware or we believe that such a witness or any relative thereof, their safety are threatened by any person, and then we, other than investigating the threat through our crime intelligence, we do risk assessment, to determine the extent of the threat, and where it warrants that we approach the witness protection officer in terms of the Witness Protection Act, and then we do so and place those witnesses until the cases are finalized. Coming to where there is cases of intimidation and murder, we investigate and ensure that those who are responsible are brought to book. But we are limited to those who are witnesses to assist in to ensure that they are placed in a witness protection until the matter is finalized in court, or those who report to say to the police officers to say they feel or believe their lives are threatened. Then the investigation and the threat analysis will start from there, and the cases will be opened for further investigation in order to bring the perpetrators thereof to book.
Is there a particular pattern that we see, General Shabiru, when it comes to those that are whistleblowers and that are attacked? So are there similarities in how these killings take place? And when it comes to the police investigating them, do you find that it's any more difficult to investigate the murder of a whistleblower than just any other murder taking place in the country?
Yeah, in some instances, the whistleblower, we established that, or the witnesses, we established that they are harmed by those people who are charged in a particular matter because they don't want to see themselves matter finalized in court and be imprisoned. And mostly we successfully arrest the suspect. But in some instances, we have established that a person might be a whistleblower or a witness, but killed for any other reason, not related to the case per se.
And when you then approach these matters, because what we have seen is that a whistleblower will come to the police or even social activists, right? And it brings us back to some of these definitions, as Kelly was saying, who qualifies to actually be recognized as a whistleblower. So if you have social activists that are being threatened, how do the police deal with those matters of harassment? Because, of course, what we have on record is that often, yes, these individuals are able to go and lay complaints with the police, but nothing much ever happens beyond that.
With activists, because we mostly work with them in the society, as and when threats are reported, cases will be opened and investigated, and perpetrators traced and arrested and charged for that. The problem is sometimes they are given bail even if they are arrested. And also that is where we will also try to ascertain the level or the extent of the threat, and when the case is opened, because now he is a witness now, even though he's a whistleblower or an activist. When he becomes a witness, then we have only this Witness Protection Act 112 of 1998, which we will refer you to the Witness Protection Officer, which resort under the NPA. It's not within the SAPS. For us, is to deal with the case itself, investigate, arrest the perpetrator, refer, assist the witness in terms of application, or if there was no case, then we will do the assessment and still refer. Then the Witness Protection Officer will then determine if that person will be taken in or not.
John, are we finding that the SAPS are seen as or even considered a safe space for activists?
No, they're not.
Okay.
I'm afraid they're not, Cathy. And I'm listening to General, and I know and I'd like to talk with him personally if I can, or personally about it. My most recent whistleblower came to me after hearing me on the media to tell me the story about how he had helped facilitate the reporting of a corrupt practice in a particular state institution. He found a senior police officer who was seemingly helpful. And the next thing that happened is my client got dismissed by the company. So clearly what looks to happen is that this police officer, it was a detective sergeant who was investigating another case. He then took this as an opportunity to get paid by the institution to basically rat on the fact that there was a whistleblower complaint within that institution. And my client is still fired, out of work, and he's listening right now, and I'm listening to everybody and saying, I hope that the people that are listening are getting some encouragement, because I'm afraid I'm not particularly, and I don't like to fight with people that I know are working on this ultimately for the same purpose. The other issue which really concerns me, and is something for Calais to think about in terms of legislative reform, we have been able to bring about legislative change in this country, not through parliamentary reform, but through litigation. The whole mineral sands conflict, that led to the death of Bazooka Radebe, what that galvanized us to do is to redouble our efforts, and we were able to successfully ensure that mining rights could no longer be awarded without free, prior, informed consent. I was then sued for defamation together with 5 others by the mining company from Australia. We were able to go to the Constitutional Court and get a judgment, the mineral sands judgment. So the question I have, and that judgment, by the way, was very effectively used when Karen Morn was being targeted by Jacob Zuma and his cronies. So we've now got we've got case law, and I'm wondering, and I want to ask Calais, are you not integrating the legislative reform to ensure that we stop slap suits? Because there's a variation that applies to whistleblowers, which I call slow suits, strategic litigation on whistleblowers, which means that you use a PDA, things take so long. 2.5 years for one of my clients, waiting for his day in court, and then the court gets adjourned, and he has to come back 2 weeks later. He's been unemployed, out of work, with no money for 2.5 years, when the justice is so clearly on his side, but the justice system does not serve him. It's not a level playing field, so there's that concern. And then also against the media. Look at Karen Morn's book. If you read her book, she talks about how she experienced what I call another variation of the same basic species. It's called the SLAM suit, strategic litigation against media. So we've got whistleblowers, media, and activists being targeted by, and the legal process is so, I mean, it's not just justice delayed, being justice denied. It's been delayed so long, it's injustice compounded. And I'd like to see a lot more energy being put in from Parliament, from everybody, to say we've got to move much more quickly if we are going to stop corruption, because this is about getting rid of corruption.
All right.
The most effective means of stopping corruption is to protect, support whistleblowers. And unfortunately, the thugocratic machine that runs this country still, in many respects, they know that. It would be bad for business if whistleblowers were protected. That's why it's taking so long, in my belief.
Kelly, let me give you an opportunity to respond.
Yes. With regard to the current processes that are provided for in approaching the Labour Court, etc., for relief, I did say that we are looking at measures to make that a simpler process and to see whether special measures cannot be made for whistleblowers. Then to come to the second point about what John referred to as slam suits. These are where the person... someone is trying to bring an action against a whistleblower for whatever reason and etc. One cannot, the general principle is that one cannot limit the right of anyone to courts, because that's guaranteed in the Constitution as a right of access to courts. However, the rules of court do provide for instances where a person is unnecessarily prolonging the processes, or bringing an action or a lawsuit that is not strictly within the rules of court. Then there's an application to dismiss and the matters are argued. So the rules do provide certain kinds of protection to ensure that the right cases get to court and that it gets to a judgment stage as quickly as is possible, to ensure that the suit is decided on the merits of the case and not on any other viewpoint in terms of whether the person should have brought the lawsuit in the first place, but on the merits of the case and whether there has been any kind of attempt to intimidate a person. And of course, in the rulings of the court, there will be a finding made should there any bad faith be found insofar as instituting that litigation is concerned.
I want to bring in Anonymous in the Eastern Cape. Anonymous, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to chip in with regards to the very same problem. I'm also an activist, and I'm a witness in a state case, a very sensitive case, which I'm not going to name now, which I'm going to be a witness in the next couple of weeks in the High Court. I have written several emails to the head of DPCI. The very same DPCI, and even the general that's sitting in that office or sitting there and commenting there, I've written several emails to them complaining about DPCI members who's harassing people who has been whistleblowers. The very same DPCI. I have not received a single response from any of them up until today. And I've quoted and I've said to them that my life is also being in danger. Now, I'm telling you today, Cathy, this thing of killing whistleblowers is not going to stop unless corruption is rooted out within the SAPS itself, and especially within this elite unit, which is called the DPCI. They think they are above the law. They can do what they like and break rules and everything. But management there in Pretoria, they don't take heed to any of complaints submitted to them. I've got proof that I've submitted many complaints since last year. I have not received a single positive response. All I've received is that the matter is being received and has been escalated to the provincial office.
Anonymous,
and that's it.
You, of course, would then also fall under protections in as far as witness protection is concerned.
I don't want to be in a witness protection.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be free.
Mm.
I want to be free and assist in fighting crime. Because once you're in a witness protection house, you're not going to be free. That I can tell you. It's like you are in prison. Okay. I don't want that.
Okay.
I don't want that.
All right.
I want the management of SAPS to take responsibility of their own members, because it's because of them that some of these whistleblowers are killed.
Anonymous, thanks for calling in and for sharing that with us. Kimberly. In Kimberly, Denzel, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. I'm going to start with Summer as well. Charlton Leo was taken out because he investigated highly ranking SAPS members. His wife is taking off witness protection as we speak. She's so vulnerable, she and the kids. Then I'm going to talk about the 4-day. He's in court right now, the 4-day incident. Why I mentioned these two. SAPS, there's no one in SAPS. The cases that shall investigated. There's no feedback. We don't know how far their cases are. The ones of 4-day, at least we know some of them have been arrested, but the top ones at the top, Cathy, they don't get arrested. My problem is too many critical institutions are involved in crime. Too many. And my second problem is most of them, we don't get or the top tier don't get arrested. And integrity is gone. Integrity is gone. Where if I apply for a job, Cathy, they send me for police clearance. How many of these people in the top jobs, how many of them go for police clearance? That is my question.
Okay.
Thank you, Cathy.
Denzel out in Kimberley, thanks for that contribution. Look, we're at the top of the hour now, so we'll see which of our guests are able to stay on so that they can respond just to the issues that you have raised in those calls. Let's take you to the latest news update.
Copperbelt ladies and Durban ladies both want to collect maximum points in the early days of the season. Who will dominate this 90 minutes? Limpopo, or KZN. This is the Hollywood Men's Super League. Catch Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game. Copperbelt Ladies versus Durban Ladies on Saturday, 15 March at 11:30 a.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Thank you, Cathy. Top stories at 11. Electoral Commission explores the feasibility of e-voting system, and Chad arrests journalist accused of translating Russian files. For SAFM News, I am Ondelambana, and a very good morning. The 3-day e-voting conference hosted by the Electoral Commission of South Africa has begun in Cape Town. The conference aims to facilitate an informed national dialogue on the feasibility and policy implications of electronic voting in the country. It serves as an opportunity for South Africans to initiate steps that will shape the future of voting in the country. Electoral management bodies and electoral authorities from countries that have implemented e-voting technologies will present their insights. IEC Chairperson Mosotho Moepia.
In 2013, we hosted an international e-voting conference in South Africa. It was here in Cape Town. At that point, we had looked at the entire world to say, who in the world is using electronic voting and what type of electronic voting is that? And so 10 years later, almost 12 years later, we are back here. We have brought in countries that have used it, countries that have stopped using it, and we are saying, what do South Africans also say about it?
Moepia also says the IEC is looking at the possibility of e-voting for the future and necessarily for next year's local elections.
We are not reacting to perhaps a local government election that is coming in 2026. We know that there is a lead time that must be taken to appreciate, to have a discussion, and to settle e-voting, as it were, in our country. So we are not doing this with 2026 in mind.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has lauded the late dramatist, novelist and actor Athol Fugard, who passed away yesterday at the age of 93. The president has described him as an extraordinary storyteller in extraordinary times and the moral conscience of a generation. Fugard's worldview was shaped by his time working as a clerk in the Native Commissioner's Court in Johannesburg in the late 1950s. He then went on to write plays such as The Island, Sizwe Banzi is Dead, No Good Friday and Master Harold and the Boys, which depict the cruelty and dehumanization wrought by the apartheid system. He was renowned for collaborating across the color divide at a time when this was prohibited and founded several theatre companies alongside black actors. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya.
Beyond the impressive body of work that he has left behind, Athol Fugard will be remembered for being an outlier amongst the millions of white South Africans who blithely turned a blind eye to the injustice being perpetrated in their name. As a country, we are grateful that we were able to honor the legendary Athol Fugard during his lifetime with the National Order of Ikhamanga in silver.
KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Transport's Boniso Duma says buses transporting people to various destinations ahead of the Easter holidays must be roadworthy. Duma was speaking to the media at the site of yesterday's bus crash on the N2 between Mandeni and Stenga in KwaZulu-Natal. It claimed the lives of 9 people. The 88-seater bus is believed to have plummeted down a steep embankment after a tyre burst. Duma elaborates on road safety plans ahead of what is typically a busy Easter season in the province.
Said that there are dimensional matters, probably the issue of cleansing processes, because you always have these things. So at some point in time, let us do probably a prayer and do some other cleansing. But the issue of visibility, yes, RTI will be visible. RTMC will have a joint operation in particular. That's why I'm saying that we are going to launch here in this area, in this belt in particular. I think it is going to assist, because the reality that ability of RTI and the theme that zero tolerance in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, it's something that we are going to launch and implement.
Chad has arrested a journalist it accuses of translating documents detailing operations conducted in Mali by Russian mercenaries. The Sahel's economy, the BBC's domestic and Derbyshire reports.
The national broadcaster telling Chad said the arrest of its member of staff Mohamed Salah al-Essay was connected to that of Olivier Menorgi from the French broadcaster RFI last Wednesday. Mr. Menorgi, who remains in custody, was detained after writing an article on the inauguration of a Russian cultural center in the Chaldean capital N'Djamena last September. He's expected to appear in court on Monday. Arrests of journalists, politicians and opposition figures are on the increase in Chad, which has distanced itself from its former colonial ruler, France, and aligned with Moscow, whose influence is on the rise across Africa.
Recapping the top story, the three-day e-voting conference hosted by the Electoral Commission of South Africa has begun in Cape Town. The conference aims to facilitate an informed national dialogue on the feasibility and policy implications of electoral voting in the country. I am Ondila Mbada for SFM News, headlines at 11:30.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
How's Cathy? Push up. This thing you witness, I can urge people to stop witnessing because guys, we are getting killed. This is this thing I am poise, like an IP program whereby you stand to that side and then criminals stand that side, then you have to point of no, it's this one. Even there is not safe because of my poise. Nagidagahana case here witness against security lapras because of election once we witness but and then so what you have to do, you have to just change this ruling government right now. Current government must be out and focus on the new one. Guys, let's change these people. Check your vote.
This is the state is letting down the whistleblowers because most of the whistleblowers are murdered when there's a postponement of a case for further investigation. Why in the first place prosecute if you haven't concluded your investigation? These postponements is a problem. That's the time when the witnesses, the whistleblowers are murdered there. Norman from Brixton.
Cathy, a witness and a whistleblower should be treated the same way. Remove them from their houses, place them in a protected house, in a secret location, as another town, another city, and you keep on moving them from time to time to different places until you have dealt with the case. And even after the case, they have to be protected so that they are safe. We cannot talk about the whistleblower as if
Igijela by Tandiswa there, setting the tone for our final conversation for this morning. We're looking at 10 years of the Roads Must Fall, Fees Must Fall movement. And it was literally 10 years ago that we saw the statue of Cecil John Rhodes covered in poo, really. I think that's how it came to be characterized. If you look at many of the headlines of the time, feces thrown on that particular statue at the University of Cape Town's upper campus. And that protest, that activity, also then being a catalyst for the hashtag Roads Must Fall movement and the Fees Must Fall movement. And you remember how thousands of the country's students took to the streets, raising various issues around the reform and the transformation needed in our institutions of higher learning. And the reason why this statue was the one that was attacked is that protesters felt that it was seen as a symbol of oppression. Now, it grew. This is the protests and why they were organizing in the first place, grew to look at issues of institutional racism, lack of transformation at the universities, access to higher education, student accommodation, the missing middle. These are all issues that I think you can find in that basket. Now, our guests for this hour have been paying close attention to this project around decolonizing our institutions of higher learning. Professor Simphiwe Sesanti is a professor of education at the University of the Western Cape. Professor Sesanti, good morning.
Revolutionary greetings to you, my sister, and to the listeners.
Professor Mlamuli Tlachwayo is Associate Professor at the Ali Mazrui Center for Higher Education Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Prof. Tlachwayo, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy, and morning to your listeners.
Look, it's almost unbelievable to think of the fact that 10 years has gone by since the hashtag Roads Must Fall and the Fees Must Fall movement. Professor Sesanti, if we were to reflect on the imprint of those particular actions on the country, on institutions of higher learning, you know, it's 10 years now that we have the opportunity to look back and say, well, what was actually accomplished? What did the students manage to get done? What would you say the answer to that question is?
Thank you very much, Madam Mohlahlana. The first thing that I would say is that the students taught us, we would remember that it was when they rose, it was 21 years after South Africa had become a democracy. And the same years that we had a political party that comes from the liberation movement background being in place, but it also shows us that in truth, the voting and changing of people in office does not necessarily bring about fundamental changes. And therefore, the students were telling us in 2015 that, in fact, the key of anything and everything in society, that is education, continued to be colonial and continued to be Eurocentric. And therefore, the students significantly were saying to us that, we needed to decolonize and specifically to bring about an Afrocentric education. So what they did fundamentally was that they were not merely opposing something, but they were proposing something. Because more often than not, throughout the history of the liberation struggle, that's why we find that many African countries have had what you would refer to as an anthem independence and a flag independence, but nothing fundamentally having transformed or changed fundamentally. And so this is what these students were pointing us towards, that we needed a fundamental change that was because, there's a difference between reform and transform. So when we're speaking about transformation, we're speaking about a total displacement or a rearrangement, or rather a reconfiguration. So this was very significant that the students had done. And in fact, for people like me who are academics, they were pointing out to us that we were comfortable in the system and not addressing the key issues that students had died for, that had struggled for before South Africa became a democracy in 1994. Let me pause there.
Prof. Tlachayo, what would you say they were able to accomplish?
I think at a significant level, Cathy, is to bring the decolonization of curricula back to the dinner tables. If you'd recall, the ideas of decolonization transformation, they were quite popular in the late 1990s, early 2000s, with Nsiepe, Makgoba, and others. But to some extent, that conversation had died down. And then in 2008, you had the Sudan report, when those white racist Afrikaner boys at the University of the Free State, right, they fed feces to the black cleaners over there and stuff. It did emerge a little bit, but it was more transformation. It was more integration. It was more trying to create a more inclusive higher education system so that black students and those who are historically oppressed can fit in and belong and things like that. So what was absolutely spot on and significant about what the students did in 2015 is to bring the conversations around the knowledge question that Professor Santi is raising quite well, that a large number of our knowledges in public universities in the country are still quite colonial, are still quite Eurocentric. They still tend to value the global north gaze at the expense of the global south. So students brought that back to the dinner table. Also, another thing that was also quite important, Cathy, that they brought to us is the issue of institutional culture, particularly in historically white universities. Here I'm talking about your Stellenbosch, UCT, Rhodes, UP Wits to some extent, where black students in those institutions have been lamenting for the longest time around issues of institutional racism, sexism, disrespect, and non-belonging that they have to navigate almost on a daily basis there, together with black academic staff members. So those two key for me was quite significant in bringing them back to the dinner tables and making them a necessary conversation that we have to tackle in our public universities.
We're going to continue this conversation shortly. It's now 11:30. Here are your latest headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. In the news headlines, 4 scholars have died following 2 vehicles which crashed on the N12 westbound just before Patfontein Road off ramp outside Davidton in Gauteng's East Rand. Motorists are advised to use alternative roads at the N12 westbound is still closed. The 3-day e-voting conference hosted by the Electoral Commission of South Africa has begun in Cape Town. The conference aims to facilitate an informed national dialogue on the feasibility and policy implications of electronic voting in the country. And there have been violent clashes with police in Romanian capital Bucharest after the authorities banned the far-right frontrunner Călin Georgescu from standing in May's presidential election. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
The citizens are not willing to settle for anything less than a win.
And now it's with Haaland and on to Foden. Foden to finish the game. And he does.
However, the Seagulls want to triple their efforts to collect valuable points against reigning champs.
Lovely touch for Mitoma. Mitoma could be away. Here it is. Mitoma one-on-one. Mitoma, delightful.
This is the Premier League. Witness the superb contest, Manchester City FC versus Brighton and Hove Albion FC on Saturday 15 March at 4:30 p.m. live on S3. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Ashraf Gada on SAFM.
Explain what do you mean and why you felt the need to say just that.
I've realized over the last few days that Afrikaner voices have been silent. I think I know why, and maybe we can get to that. But the reality is we've allowed Solidarity and AfriForum to speak for us. And I can't let them speak for me because I vehemently disagree with a lot of what they are saying. But because they're so vocal and very well connected into the media, people think that's how all Afrikaners think. And it absolutely isn't.
Dr. Louise van Rijn was a leadership development expert, social entrepreneur, and also the founder of Partners for Possibilities.
You're listening to the National Pulse. Missed it? Find the podcast at safm.co.za. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Thanks for tuning into the show this hour. We're looking at the hashtag Roads Must Fall, hashtag Fees Must Fall movements. It's been 10 years since those hit our national landscape, and we're reflecting on some of the progress and the setbacks when it comes to the project of decolonizing our higher education institutions. Professor Simphiwe Sesanti is a professor of education at the University of the Western Cape, and Professor Mlamuli Tlhajwayo is associate professor at the Ali Masri Center for Higher Education Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Professor Sesanti, you know...
Yes, ma'am.
I, of course, have given you the opportunity to talk about what it is that you believe that the students were able to achieve as a result of that ongoing protest action that we saw in the country. And it, of course, was not just limited to the experience of students. We also saw staff members at institutions of higher learning also finding their voices, right? And raising these concerns too, and speaking about them from their own experiences as, you know, individuals that are part of the system, but sometimes feeling that they were overpowered, overwhelmed, unable to actually change, even on a conversation like curriculum, that when they tried to do that, there was pushback. Are we looking any better now? Are we doing any better now in terms of some of the experiences that those that are part of institutions of higher learning have also experienced and gone through?
Thank you very much for that question. Let me begin by saying that, you know, what many of us tend not to acknowledge is that to begin with, institutions of learning, all of them, are spaces of ideological contestation. And therefore, they are political contestation. They either support a particular power structure or oppose it. And therefore, by saying that, let me begin by saying that historically, institutions of learning in our country have always been instruments of advancing a particular political agenda. And so in our case, you know, in the colonial world, institutions of learning were put in place by the colonialists in order to perpetuate and to strengthen the colonial agenda of oppression and exploitation. And so therefore, in those very institutions, there were those who were on the receiving end, that is the Black people in general and African people in particular, who were resisting this oppression, this colonialism and all of that. And so, you know, one of the greatest intellectuals, Frantz Fanon, taught us that you must never think that when you have defeated an enemy, you have converted that enemy. Now in South Africa, we have not even defeated the enemy. And so we should know that those who were perpetuating through Eurocentric education were not converted. And so they showed their true colors in institutions of learning. Professor Tlhajwayo was saying just a few minutes ago, making reference to Professor Malekgaporo Makgoba at the Wits University, a university that has been known as a liberal, accommodating, and all of that. But when Professor Malekgaporo Makgoba began to advance and to articulate, you know, an Afrocentric higher education, knives went out for him. he was harassed, he was given hard time and all of that. And it has happened in all institutions of learning to this very day. It is not an accident of history. You would notice, Madam Mohlahlana, that, whenever we speak about the 10 years ago and all of that, more often than not, we would hear more about the fees must fall movement, as if the Rhodes Fall movement was not there. And yet the Rhodes must fall movement was there. The reason for this is not an accident of history. It is that, whilst people can tolerate the issues of fees and all of that, what they cannot handle is the change of the paradigm, a fundamental shift. And so what therefore the students of the Rhodes Must Fall movement had done were not merely protesting, they were confronting the philosophical basis of education. And so when they did that, the liberal establishment was not happy. To this very day, there are colleagues who are writing books and ridiculing and either, if they are not ridiculing Afrocentric education, they treat it with complete silence, so that this discourse must not go on. And yet those students specifically stated that they not only opposed colonial education, but they proposed Afrocentric education. So that resistance, that contestation continues in our institutions of learning to this very day. And so, because it deals with core issues of ideology, and many of us, tend to pretend as if they are not ideological, but rather they use the word that they would prefer to use is philosophy. You would speak about philosophy of liberalism and all of that, and yet liberalism is very, very ideological.
Prof. Tlhatjwayo, just on this question of a fundamental shift, right, through, especially when it comes to the lens through which this education is developed, what needs to go into it for it to be truly transformative? And again, institutions of higher learning, of course, pride themselves of being institutions that, if you do a course in, I don't know, what example can one use? Accounting. If you do a course in accounting that you get from a local university, it should be comparable to any other course that you would get elsewhere in the world. And I wonder then how these two worlds meet and what needs to go into the fundamental shift so that our institutions are still globally competitive, open, and seen as open to the whole world, while at the same time also embracing the uniqueness and the nuance of the continent that we live on.
Brilliant question, Cathy. I'm just tempted to simply say the two worlds have always been meeting. It's just that we are engaging with colleagues who are not really honest about how they really feel about decolonization and transformation. It was never an either or. It was never a colonial binary between linear conceptions of Afrocentricity that only look inwards versus the cosmopolitan global world that only looks external. We've always been cosmopolitan. We've always involved. Homi Baba says, the colonizer is in us and we are in them. So it's difficult to separate ourselves from them and them from us and things like that. So to give you a quick answer to that, Cathy, if you just look at the Chinese universities over there, they are emerging as one of the most top-ranked global institutions, competing with the Harvards, the Cambridge, the Princetons, and the Stanford and others, even though they are still quite largely using their own Chinese language. Chinese and Asian students in general tend to perform quite well globally in terms of mathematics and sciences. They don't use English. They decolonize, they localize the mathematical language, the accounting language, the STEM language into comparable, contextually relevant examples that makes the curriculum much more accessible to some of the rural learners and students in their own context. The only question is, why can we not do that in South Africa? Why can we not do that in Africa? Why can we not do that in the global south? clearly leading countries in the world are doing that, and they're reaping quite a lot of rewards, because there is something about the ways in which language as a tool, not just to get access to culture, Cathy, but to teaching and learning, to understanding, to deep knowledge, to the discipline and others that could be inculcated from the children when they're young and taking them to university. And that's absolutely one of the ways where we can do that. So it has always been transnational. We've always been cosmopolitan. It's just that we are engaging with colleagues and individuals who are not really necessarily interested in transformation and decolonization. And so whenever you level some of these advances that are being done in Asia, Singapore, and other contexts, and you're telling them, but look at their institutions, look at their educational outcomes, look at the ways in which they are succeeding. Surely if we can also tap into the rich linguistic and cultural diversity in the country, whether you're drawing on Setswana, whether you're drawing on Sizulu, whether you're drawing on Chivenda and others, I mean, there is so much to be gained from that. But unfortunately, it's not a conversation based on intellectual integrity and honesty. And you are always made to feel it's an either or, right? Either your child only learns Sizulu and that's it, they will never do anything else, or they learn English and then they become global. I'm saying the tension is flawed. It has never been there. We've got an example from our Chinese, Singaporeans, and other counterparts in Malaysia showing that it could actually work.
Prof. Tlachayo, I'm interested in sort of your emphasis on the use of language as, you know, a sign of decolonization. Because I think, you know, even institutions of higher learning themselves, I think academia as a whole is sort of still debating what a decolonized education system, what that means, what that would look like.
Absolutely. And you know, for me, Cathy, and I hope Speaker can come in, we define decolonization as a process and not as an outcome. And really what I mean by that is we will never get to a decolonized university, but it's always a decolonial in the sense that we are constantly reflecting, we are constantly thinking, rethinking, unlearning, relearning, and finding creative ways of making sure that this university, not just democratic, inclusive, and fair, but it's also an institution that tends to promote the different types of knowledges that we find in our institution. And language plays a critical role in that. I mean, we've got learners coming from Soshanguve, Soweto, and the different townships of this country who are not just translanguaging, they are code switching. I mean, they grew up speaking Isindebele, they grew up speaking Isizulu, they grew up speaking Southern Sotho, they grew up speaking Setswana and things like that. Why don't we tap into the linguistic richness and diversity of those learning? Find a way for university to empower these kinds of students in our classroom and make that into a brand new discipline of translanguaging. We ourselves as South Africans beginning to teach the world around finding linguistic ways of moving across and between and through different forms of language to be able to create knowledge. For me, that's an advantage, and it is happening with our learners and our children in the townships and some of them in the rural areas at the moment. And we just need to find creative ways of intellectualizing those languages, theorizing them, and then making them as a legitimate form of scholarship so that we can teach the world that it is possible to think across different types of languages.
Professor Sesanti, to wrap this conversation up, it seems that, you know, it's on one end we're able to sort of really have institutions of high learning, you know, contending with these ideas quite robustly so. Today it feels like they've sort of taken a back seat, you know, that we've moved on, that it's not part of the key conversations we're having. Very briefly, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is not inevitable, considering that those who are resistant towards these ideas continue to occupy very powerful forces. But even then, those who continue to advocate this, you know, are also pushing on. And, you know, just in 1 minute, institutions of higher learning are supposed to be engaging with communities. And so there are those of us who are paying a very close attention, not only to those who are academics like us, but also to great people like the writer Cindy Magona, who is writing in relation to what Professor Hlatshwayo was saying, she's writing children's books for children, because decolonization is not just about institutions of higher learning. It must start right at the bottom. And so Masindiwe Magona has contributed a great deal, and I think we need to pay great tribute to her on this month of the International Women's Month. That woman who has done so much through her writings of developing conscientization and raising consciousness about the need for African people to reclaim their souls and their children in particular, so that they are going to grow up as citizens who are self-respecting and as one who are going to command respect from the world in its entirety as Africans, and particularly and especially as women, because colonialism expresses itself through racism and sexism must not be left out. Thank you.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Professor Sisandi, Professor Hlatshwayo, let me thank you for your time. It's a wrap from the Talking Point for this Monday.
On the 1st of July 2022, the President of the Republic of South Africa signed the National Forest Amendment Act 2022, Act number 1 of 2022, the Amendment Act, into law. The President has now proclaimed the Amendment Act and determined its commencement date as the 4th of December 2024. The Minister has also published amendment regulations which seeks to give effect to certain sections of the Amendment Act. A copy of the proclamation notice and the amendment regulations can be accessed on the following websites: www.dffe.gov.za/legislation/gazetted notices, or www.gpwonline.gov.za. Any communication or media inquiries in connection with the publication can be directed to Mr. Peter Mbelengwa, Chief Director of Communication and Advocacy. The telephone number is 012-399-8842, or the cell phone number 082-611-8197, or email pmbelengwa@dffe.gov.za.
From the 10th to the 16th of March 2025, the South African National Biodiversity Institute is hosting its first National Gardens Week. Visitors can enjoy free entry to all national botanical and zoological gardens across South Africa, including Kirstenbosch National Botanical Garden and the Pretoria Zoo. This year's theme, Grow Your Joy, invites visitors to embrace nature, wellness,